house stood on a quiet hill at the edge of the city, glowing with warm lights as evening slowly turned into night. From far away, the place looked like something from a magazine. Tall glass windows, wide balconies, and a long driveway lined with soft golden lamps. Luxury cars arrived one after another, each more expensive than the last. Drivers opened doors, and guests stepped out wearing elegant clothes, confident smiles, and expensive perfumes. This was not an ordinary gathering. It was a private party hosted by a man known for his wealth, power, and sharp tongue. Inside, everything was carefully planned to impress. Crystal glasses filled with drinks clinked softly. A live band played light music in the background. The air smelled of fine food and polished wood. Guests laughed loudly, talking about business deals, vacations, and investments. Some were trying to impress others, while some were only there to be seen. The mood was flashy, but also tense in a quiet way. Everyone wanted to belong and no one wanted to look small. Among all this glamour, a small group of staff moved silently through the room. They wore simple uniforms and kept their heads down. They knew their job was to serve, not to speak. One of them was a young woman working as a waitress. She carried trays carefully, walking slowly to avoid any mistake. Her clothes were neat but plain. Her hair was tied back, and her face showed calm focus. She did not look nervous, but she did not look confident either. She looked like someone used to being invisible. She had taken this job because she needed the money. Life had not been kind to her, and this was one of several part-time jobs she worked to get by. She arrived early that day, helped with preparation, and listened closely to instructions. She knew this was an important event, and mistakes would not be forgiven easily. For her, this party was not about luxury. It was just another long shift. As the night went on, guests became louder. The host moved around the room, shaking hands, laughing, and enjoying attention. He liked being admired. He liked knowing that people wanted his approval. He was used to controlling rooms, and tonight was no different. Every detail reflected his success, and he made sure everyone noticed it. At one side of the room stood a grand piano. It was large, black, and shiny, placed there more as a symbol than an instrument. It matched the style of the house, expensive and perfect. Most guests passed it without a second look. It was just another decoration in a room full of them. The waitress noticed the piano while walking past it. For just a moment, her steps slowed. Her eyes rested on the smooth surface, and something quiet moved inside her. It was not excitement, not sadness, but something deeper, a memory. She quickly looked away and continued working. No one noticed her pause, or so she thought. As the night grew later, drinks flowed more freely. Conversations became careless. Some guests began making jokes that crossed lines, laughing too hard at their own words. The host, enjoying the mood, joined in. He spoke loudly, making comments about people, status, and success. Many laughed along, even when they felt uncomfortable. It was easier to laugh than to disagree. The waitress continued serving, moving from group to group. She kept her face neutral even when comments felt sharp. She had learned long ago that silence was safer. Still, she could feel eyes on her at times. Not friendly eyes, but judging ones. Some guests barely acknowledged her presence. Others treated her like furniture. At one point, she was asked to stand near the piano area, helping guests with drinks. She stayed there, holding a tray, listening to the music and chatter. Her eyes drifted back to the piano again, just for a second. She did not touch it. She did not smile. She simply looked, then focused back on her work. That small moment did not go unnoticed this time. The host saw it. He had been watching the room, and he caught her glance. Something about it amused him. Maybe it was the way she looked at the piano, or maybe he was already in the mood to show power. He leaned toward a nearby guest and said something quietly. They both laughed. Soon, the host raised his voice slightly, enough for those nearby to hear. He made a casual comment about staff being curious about expensive things. A few guests chuckled. The waitress felt heat rise to her face, but she kept her eyes down. She pretended not to hear, even though every word landed clearly. The room continued buzzing, but a small tension had formed. The host's attention had turned toward her, even if only as a joke. For him, it was harmless fun. For her, it was something else entirely. Still, she said nothing. She did her job. As more guests gathered closer to the piano area, the atmosphere slowly shifted. The band took a short break, and the music stopped. Conversations filled the space where sound had been. The host, now holding a drink, glanced again toward the waitress. There was a smile on his face, but it was not kind. She felt it before anything happened. That feeling people get when they know they are about to be noticed, not in a good way. Her hands tightened slightly around the tray. She told herself to stay calm. It would pass. Things always passed. But this night was different. The host cleared his throat and made a louder comment, drawing more attention. Guests nearby turned their heads. Some smiled, expecting entertainment. Others looked curious. The waitress stood still, unsure if she should move away or stay where she was. This was the moment where everything quietly shifted. What began as a simple party, full of wealth and laughter, was slowly turning into something else. A test of dignity. A moment that would soon pull a quiet waitress into the center of a room she never wanted to stand in. She did not know it yet, but the night that started like any other shift was about to change her life in a way she could never have planned. The room felt different after the host spoke. It was not loud yet, not dramatic, but something had shifted in the air. Conversations slowed, and a few guests turned their bodies slightly, trying to see what would happen next. The waitress remained where she was, holding the tray steady, her face calm on the outside while her thoughts moved quickly inside her mind. She had learned long ago how to stay still when attention came her way. Life had taught her that reacting often made things worse. So she stood there, breathing slowly, waiting for the moment to pass. She hoped the host would laugh it off and move on to someone else. That was how these things usually ended. But the host was enjoying himself too much. He liked having an audience. He liked seeing people watch him, waiting for his next move. He raised his glass slightly and made another comment, louder this time. It sounded playful on the surface, but there was an edge underneath. A few guests laughed again, though some did it nervously. The waitress felt eyes on her now. Not just one or two, but many. Some were curious. Some were judging. A few looked uncomfortable, as if they knew this was going too far, but did not want to speak up. She kept her gaze low, focusing on the floor for a moment, then straight ahead. Her hands did not shake, but her chest felt tight. The host gestured toward the piano with his drink. He made a joke about how everyone should enjoy some entertainment now that the band was on break. Then he glanced at the waitress and smiled. It was the kind of smile that made people feel small. He asked, half joking, half daring, if she liked music. She hesitated, only for a second. Then she answered quietly that she did. Her voice was soft but clear. She did not look at him directly, but she did not hide either. Some guests leaned in slightly, sensing something interesting was happening. The host laughed and said that was good. He said the piano was there for a reason, after all. He looked around the room, enjoying the moment, and then said something that made the laughter grow louder. He suggested that maybe she could play something simple for everyone. Just a little tune. Nothing fancy. The word simple hung in the air. The waitress felt her heart beat faster. Her first instinct was to refuse. This was not part of her job. She was there to serve drinks, not to perform. She opened her mouth to speak, but the host kept talking, filling the space with jokes. He told the guests not to worry, that this was just for fun. He said it would be nice to see someone from the staff try. A few people laughed more loudly now. Others looked down at their glasses. The pressure in the room grew. The waitress felt trapped between silence and humiliation. If she said no, she would look rude or afraid. If she said yes, she risked becoming a joke. She thought of all the times she had swallowed her pride to survive. All the times she had stayed quiet to keep peace. She thought of her long shifts, her small apartment, her tired body at the end of each day. This moment felt heavier than it should have, like something important was being decided. She took a slow breath and said she had not played in a long time. Her voice was steady, though her hands felt warm. The host raised his eyebrows, pretending to be impressed. He waved his hand and said that was fine. This was not a concert, he reminded her. Just a few notes. The guests waited. Some smiled, expecting something awkward. Others watched closely, unsure of what they wanted to happen. The room felt smaller, as if the walls had moved closer together. The waitress looked at the piano again. This time she did not turn away quickly. Memories rose quietly, not loud or painful, just present. She remembered sitting on a bench that was too big for her feet to reach the floor. She remembered worn keys and soft light. She pushed the memories aside. This was not the time. She placed the tray on a nearby table with care. Her movements were slow, controlled. She did not rush. She did not apologize. She simply did what needed to be done. A few guests whispered to each other as she stepped closer to the piano. The host leaned back, clearly enjoying the scene. He took another sip of his drink and crossed his arms. This was entertainment to him. A harmless moment, he believed. He did not see the tension in her shoulders or the way she held herself together. As she reached the piano, the room became quieter. Even those who had been laughing sensed the change. She stood there for a moment, looking down at the keys without touching them. The piano was well cared for. Clean. Perfect. Very different from the ones she remembered. She turned slightly and looked at the host. Not with anger. Not with fear. Just calm. She asked if he was sure. Her question was polite, almost gentle. That made a few people shift in their seats. The host nodded and told her to go ahead. He said everyone was waiting. She sat down on the bench. Felt firm beneath her. Her feet rested flat on the floor. She placed her hands in her lap for a moment, as if grounding herself. The room held its breath. In that quiet pause, she felt strangely peaceful. Whatever happened next would happen. She had done her best to avoid this moment, but now that it was here, she would face it with dignity. She reminded herself that she was more than what these people thought of her. She lifted her hands slowly and placed them on the keys. Some guests leaned forward. Some smiled. Some looked away, not wanting to witness what they expected to be embarrassing. The host watched closely, confident and relaxed. The first note had not yet been played, but the energy in the room had already changed. This was no longer just a joke. It was a turning point, though no one fully understood that yet. The waitress closed her eyes for a brief moment, took one final breath, and prepared to play. The room was silent now, waiting for sound. And with that quiet stillness, everything stood on the edge of something unexpected. The first note broke the silence like a gentle knock on a door. It was soft, almost careful, as if testing the room. A few guests shifted in their seats. Some raised their eyebrows. The sound was clear and steady, not rushed, not unsure. It did not sound like a mistake. The waitress played a second note, then a third. The melody began slowly, simple on the surface, but calm and controlled. Her hands moved with quiet confidence. There was no shaking, no pause filled with fear. She was not looking around to see who was watching. Her eyes rested on the keys, focused and present. At first, a few guests smiled in a polite way. They expected something small and awkward, something they could laugh about later. But as the melody continued, those smiles faded. The sound coming from the piano did not match their expectations. The room grew still. The notes flowed into each other naturally. There was a sense of direction, like the music knew exactly where it was going. The waitress's shoulders relaxed as she played. Her breathing became slow and even. With each note, it felt as if the noise of the party was being gently pushed aside. Someone near the back stopped talking mid-sentence. Another guest lowered their glass without realizing it. Even those who had been laughing earlier felt a strange pull toward the sound. The piano was no longer decoration. It had become the center of the room. The host's smile tightened. He did not frown, but something behind his eyes shifted. This was not what he expected. He leaned forward slightly, watching her hands more closely. The confidence he had shown moments ago began to soften into curiosity. The waitress continued playing. The melody grew richer, fuller. It was still gentle, but now it carried emotion. Not sadness exactly, not joy either, but something honest and deep. It felt like a story being told without words. Her fingers moved smoothly across the keys, pressing with just the right amount of weight. The sound filled the room, reaching corners that laughter had not touched. Some guests felt their throats tighten. Others felt memories rise without knowing why. A woman standing near the window wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by the sudden emotion. A man near the piano shook his head slightly, surprised by how much the music was affecting him. No one spoke. No one laughed. No one dared to interrupt. The waitress herself seemed different now. The tension that once held her body was gone. She sat straight but relaxed, completely inside the music. For the first time that night, she did not look like someone trying to disappear. She looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. The melody shifted, becoming more complex. Still smooth, still controlled, but now layered. It was clear this was not random playing. This was skill, practice, years of understanding the instrument. Even those with no musical knowledge could feel it. The host straightened up. His drink remained untouched in his hand. His eyes stayed fixed on the piano. The room that once felt like his stage was no longer under his control. Something else had taken over. As the music grew, the waitress's hands moved faster, then slower again, following the natural rise and fall of the piece. She did not rush to impress. She let the notes breathe. She trusted the silence between sounds. Guests exchanged quiet looks. Some leaned toward each other but did not speak. They were sharing the same unspoken thought. This was not supposed to happen. This was not part of the evening's plan. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, each note clear and full. The sound was strong but never harsh. It wrapped around the room, changing the energy completely. The party felt far away now, like something from earlier in the day. The waitress closed her eyes briefly as she played a softer section. Her face showed calm, but also something tender. It was as if the music was allowing her to speak in a way words never could. Whatever she had carried with her into that room was slowly finding its way into the sound. One guest shifted uncomfortably, realizing how wrong the earlier laughter had been. Another felt a flush of shame and looked down at the floor. The jokes from before now felt small and careless. The host cleared his throat softly but did not say anything. He knew better than to interrupt now. The attention he once enjoyed had fully moved away from him. The room was listening to her. The melody reached a gentle peak, then eased back. The waitress's hands slowed, her fingers resting lightly on the keys between phrases. The silence between notes felt heavy with feeling. No one dared to fill it. A server standing near the doorway stopped moving entirely, tray forgotten. Even the staff felt it. This was not just music. It was presence. It was someone reclaiming something that had been taken long ago. As the piece continued, the confidence in her playing became undeniable. Each section flowed naturally into the next. There was intention in every movement. Nothing was forced. Nothing was showy. It was simply real. The host finally lowered his glass onto a nearby table. The sound was soft, but noticeable in the quiet room. He crossed his arms, not in confidence now, but in thought. His expression had changed. The ease on his face was gone. The waitress played on, unaware of the thoughts moving through the room. Or perhaps she was aware and no longer cared. The music had given her a kind of protection, a space where judgment could not reach her. As the final section approached, the melody softened again. The notes became lighter, almost fragile, but steady. Her fingers moved with care, honoring the moment rather than rushing toward the end. The last note lingered in the air after she lifted her hands. It did not fade quickly. It stayed, filling the silence with something powerful. For a brief moment, no one moved. The room remained completely still, as if everyone needed time to return to themselves. The waitress kept her hands in her lap, breathing slowly. She did not look up. She did not wait for a reaction. This was no longer about proving anything. The music had already spoken, and in that quiet pause, before applause or words could break the spell, Everyone understood that the night had changed forever. The silence after the final note felt heavier than any sound. It pressed gently on everyone in the room, asking them to sit with what they had just heard. The waitress remained seated at the piano, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She did not turn around. She did not smile. She simply breathed. A few seconds passed. Then another. No one clapped yet. It was not because they did not want to. It was because they did not know how to return to the moment they had been in before the music began. Finally, someone near the back brought their hands together slowly. The sound was soft, almost unsure. That single clap seemed to wake the room. Applause spread in small waves, growing louder and stronger with each second. People stood up without planning to. Some clapped with wide smiles. Others clapped with a strange look on their faces, as if they were still trying to understand what had happened. The waitress stood up from the bench as the applause continued. She turned to face the room at last. Her expression was calm, almost shy. She nodded once, a small and polite gesture, then stepped away from the piano. Guests moved closer without realizing it. A few whispered words like, incredible and unexpected. Someone shook their head in disbelief. The piano, once ignored, now felt like the most important thing in the house. The host remained where he was, watching her walk away from the bench. The applause had caught him off guard. He forced a smile and joined in, clapping with the others. But his claps were slower, heavier. His eyes followed her as she returned toward the serving area. The waitress picked up her tray again. The simple action felt grounding. She moved carefully, just as she had earlier, but something about her posture had changed. She stood a little straighter now. Not proud, not bold, just steady. Guests began stopping her as she passed. One thanked her quietly. Another said the music was beautiful. A woman touched her arm gently and said she had not expected to feel so much from a few minutes of sound. The waitress listened, nodded, and thanked them softly. She did not explain herself. She did not share her past. Across the room, the host watched these interactions. The attention that once flowed toward him was now following someone else. The realization settled slowly, uncomfortable but clear. He cleared his throat and raised his voice slightly, trying to bring the focus back. He joked that the party had turned into a concert. A few guests laughed politely, but the laughter did not last. The energy had shifted too far. The waitress continued working, though her hands felt lighter now. The tension that had lived in her chest earlier had eased. She had not planned for this. She had not wanted attention. Yet the moment had given her something she did not know she needed. As time passed, the party did not return to its earlier noise. Conversations were quieter, more thoughtful. Some guests spoke about the music. Others spoke about talent being hidden in unexpected places. A few seemed embarrassed, replaying earlier jokes in their minds. The host stood near the piano, staring at it. He remembered the smile he had worn when he made his comments. The confidence, the sense of control. Now, standing in the same place, the memory felt different. He noticed how guests were no longer seeking him out as eagerly. Some still smiled and nodded, but their attention drifted. He felt something unfamiliar rise inside him. Not anger, not embarrassment alone. Something closer to regret. Across the room, the waitress paused near a table to pour a drink. Her reflection caught her eye in a mirror on the wall. She barely recognized the woman she saw. The same uniform, the same tired eyes, but something else too, a quiet strength. She remembered moments from her past, long buried, practice rooms, late nights, hard choices, dreams set aside not because they faded, but because life demanded it. Those memories no longer felt painful. They felt alive. A guest approached the host and spoke quietly. The host nodded, listening without really hearing. His thoughts were elsewhere. He looked again toward the waitress. This time, his gaze held no amusement. He realized that his words earlier had not been harmless. They had been careless. He had turned a person into entertainment without knowing anything about her. The weight of that truth settled heavily on him. The band prepared to return, but the mood had changed too much. When the music started again, it felt distant, almost unnecessary. The piano still held the room in its quiet grip. The waitress finished her shift duties one by one. As she moved, she noticed how people made space for her now. Not out of fear or obligation, but respect. It was unfamiliar, and she did not know how to hold it yet. The host took a deep breath and walked toward her. His steps were slower than before. He waited until she finished serving a guest before speaking. When he did, his voice was lower. He thanked her for the music. The words sounded simple, but they mattered. He paused, then said more. He admitted he had not expected what happened. He said the moment had reminded him that talent does not follow status. The waitress listened. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she nodded politely. She did not smile widely. She did not seek apology or praise. She simply accepted the moment for what it was. Around them, guests watched quietly. The power dynamic had shifted again, softer this time. There was no winner, no defeat. Just understanding. As the night moved on, people began to leave. The party ended not with noise, but with reflection. The house felt quieter, calmer. The waitress gathered her things when her shift ended. She stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights stretched below the hill, steady and familiar. She paused for a moment, listening to the silence. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen without being exposed. Heard without having to explain. Behind her, inside the house, the piano remained still. But its echo stayed with everyone who had been there. And as she walked away into the night, she did not know exactly what would come next. But she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer invisible. The air in the room was still thick with the memory of the music. Even though the performance had ended some time ago, it lingered in every corner, in every quiet conversation, in every thoughtful gaze. Guests who had been carefree, even boastful earlier, now moved with more caution. They seemed to measure their words, unsure how to navigate the space that had changed so subtly, yet completely. The host stayed near the piano, leaning lightly against it, thinking about what had just happened. The confidence he had carried all night, the sense of control, now felt fragile. He replayed the moment in his mind. The first note, the way the melody grew, the subtle power in the woman's hands. Each memory made him pause, reconsider, and realize how quickly someone could command attention without asking for it. He noticed how the guests had shifted their focus. Many still glanced at him, perhaps out of habit, but their attention always returned to her. The realization made him uneasy, but there was no room for anger, only reflection. He had underestimated her. He had judged her too quickly. And the room, in a quiet way, had reminded him that talent and dignity do not depend on social status. Meanwhile, the waitress moved through the room with a quiet grace, picking up her tray and refilling drinks. But her movements were different now. She was no longer merely serving. She had become a presence that drew notice, but not through effort or words. People gave her space not because they feared offending, but because they respected the weight she carried. There was something about her that had shifted, something subtle but undeniable. As she served, she heard soft murmurs from guests who had been standing near the piano. "She's really good," one whispered. Another replied, "I had no idea she could play like that." The words were not meant for her directly, but she caught them. She did not smile, did not boast. She simply acknowledged them with a small nod, letting the appreciation exist without demanding it. A few guests, those with a background in music, approached her carefully. They asked questions about her training, about how long she had been playing. She answered politely, giving just enough information to satisfy curiosity but not revealing too much. There was pride in her answers, but quiet, measured pride, not the kind that needs validation. The balance made her presence even more magnetic. The host watched from a distance, his thoughts a mixture of awe and discomfort. He realized that his earlier actions, meant to entertain or assert power, had backfired. The woman he had tried to embarrass had not only held her dignity but had transformed the entire room with something as simple, yet profound, as music. He felt an unfamiliar tug in his chest, a mix of humility and respect. The kind that comes when someone shows you your own smallness without saying a word. He decided to approach her. His steps were measured. The crowd seemed to sense the importance of the moment and gave them space. When he reached her, he paused. He did not speak immediately, allowing the silence to carry meaning. Finally, he spoke softly. "I did not expect that," he said. His voice was low, carrying both sincerity and hesitation. "You are incredible. I should not have—" He stopped, realizing that words alone might not capture the weight of his thought. The waitress looked at him for a moment. Her expression remained calm. She did not need to accept an apology, but she acknowledged his words with a small nod. It was a gesture of understanding, not triumph. The humility in her posture contrasted with the earlier tension in the room. In that small exchange, the balance between them shifted once more. This time not dictated by wealth or social standing, but by mutual recognition of talent and respect. Around them, guests continued to watch, some whispering among themselves. The energy of the party had changed completely. There were no loud jokes, no boastful remarks. Instead, there was quiet admiration, a sense that something important had happened here, even if they could not fully name it. The waitress moved back toward her duties, but she felt lighter. The burden of being underestimated, of being unseen, had lifted at least for the moment. The music had done more than entertain. It had created a space where she could exist as herself without compromise. The host stayed near the piano a little longer, reflecting on the lesson the night had delivered. He realized that wealth and status, while powerful, could not create true admiration or respect. Those came only through honesty, skill, and the quiet courage to stand tall when no one expected it. He could see now that he had learned something more valuable than any deal or investment he had ever made. Some guests began to speak quietly among themselves, praising the performance and discussing what it meant to witness someone with hidden talent. The conversations were softer, but more meaningful. There was curiosity, genuine curiosity, and a desire to understand rather than judge. The waitress continued her work with calm efficiency, but each movement carried a new confidence. The small gestures, pouring drinks, moving trays, offering a smile, all carried an invisible weight of someone who had been seen for the first time in a long while. She did not seek approval, but it found her anyway. Time passed, and the night wound down. Guests began to leave, exchanging polite farewells and lingering compliments. The host remained near the piano until the last few people had departed, thinking carefully about the events of the evening. When the room finally emptied, and the silence returned, the piano seemed to hold onto the echoes of her performance. It was as if the instrument itself remembered the music, the quiet power, and the dignity that had filled the space. The waitress gathered her things and prepared to leave. She stepped out into the cool night air, taking a deep breath. The city lights stretched below her, familiar yet somehow new. The experience of the evening, the music, the acknowledgement had shifted something inside her. She felt a sense of calm strength, a quiet affirmation of who she was and what she could do. She walked away from the house, the echoes of the piano still lingering in her mind. The night had been long, challenging, and unexpected. It had been a test of dignity, of patience, and of courage. And she had passed it without compromise, without losing herself. The host, inside the empty house, finally sat down at the piano he had once seen as a symbol of display. He placed his fingers lightly on the keys, not to play, but to feel the memory of what had occurred. The room was quiet, but it was full of meaning. He knew he had witnessed something rare and extraordinary. And for the first time that evening, he understood that the true measure of a person could not be seen in status, wealth, or control. It was found in talent, humility, and the quiet strength to remain oneself, even in the face of judgment. The night ended with a stillness that carried far beyond the walls of the house. Both the hostess and the guests, though for different reasons, had experienced a shift. A realization that moments of true beauty and dignity often appear when least expected, and they leave marks that cannot be erased. The waitress walked home slowly, the night air filling her lungs, her steps light yet deliberate. She carried nothing but herself, but somehow that felt like more than enough. The music she had played, the courage she had shown, and the respect she had quietly commanded, all remained with her. They were her triumph, unseen by most but undeniable to anyone who had been present. And as she disappeared into the streets, fading into the quiet of the city, the echoes of the piano lingered for everyone who had been there, reminding them that the most profound moments are often the simplest, and the greatest power sometimes lies in silent strength. The night had reached its quiet conclusion. Most guests had left, and the grand house, once full of laughter, chatter, and the occasional clinking of glasses, now felt calm and empty. The chandeliers still sparkled, reflecting the dim light, but their glow was softer, more contemplative. The room carried the faint memory of voices, of footsteps, and most importantly, of the piano. Its presence seemed to hold the echoes of the evening in place, a reminder of what had transpired. The waitress had finished her shift, carefully stacking trays and returning items to their places. Her movements were deliberate, calm, and efficient. There was no rush, no lingering anxiety. The music she had played earlier still resonated in her mind, a quiet comfort that reminded her she had faced the room with dignity and had been recognized without compromise. She gathered her coat and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of night and the distant hum of city life. She paused at the edge of the driveway, looking back at the house one last time. Its grandeur had not changed, but the energy inside had shifted entirely because of her presence. A wave of quiet satisfaction passed through her, not pride, but acknowledgement that she had honored herself and her talent. Meanwhile, inside the house, the host walked slowly from room to room, reflecting on the evening. He stopped occasionally to glance at the piano, now silent and still. His thoughts were thoughtful, almost heavy. He realized that the power he had thought he held, the control, the status, the influence over the people around him, was not the same as true respect. The evening had reminded him that respect could not be demanded. It could only be earned. And in that moment, she had earned it effortlessly. He thought back to his earlier words and actions. The casual jokes, the assumption that she would falter, the small laugh that had sparked the entire scene. They now felt distant and wrong. He could not take back what he had said, but he understood their weight. The embarrassment he had hoped to create had not landed on her. It had landed on him, albeit in a subtle and humbling way. The guests who had stayed longer for conversation were still there, discussing the performance in hushed tones. They spoke of the depth, the control, and the emotion in the music. No one had expected what they had witnessed. Some had realized that true talent could be hidden in plain sight, and their own assumptions had been quietly challenged. They left with a new perspective on judgment, humility, and the power of quiet confidence. Back outside, the waitress walked along the path toward her car. Her steps were light, though her mind wandered through the memory of the night. Each note she had played felt like a message to herself, that even when underestimated, she could shine in her own way, that she could face a room full of strangers and still remain composed, that her abilities, long tucked away, could leave a mark if only given the chance. She thought of her life, the small victories, the long hours, the sacrifices that had brought her to this point. None of it seemed wasted. None of it had prepared her for the grandeur of the house or the expectations of the guests, but it had prepared her for herself. She had learned to be patient, to endure, to keep practicing, even when no one was watching. And now, when people were watching, she had proven not just skill but courage. Inside, the host took a seat on a plush sofa near the piano. He rested his elbows on his knees, looking down at the polished keys. He imagined her hands on the piano again, precise, gentle, commanding. The memory was vivid and undeniable. The reality of what had happened sank in deeper with each passing minute. This was more than entertainment. It had been a demonstration of character, of talent, of presence. He realized that he had been the one truly tested that night, not her. A few of the remaining guests approached him, sharing quiet thoughts. They spoke of admiration, of surprise, of humility. The conversations were meaningful, sincere. No one was joking now. The night had shifted the focus from wealth and status to human talent and dignity. The host listened, taking in each word, silently acknowledging the truth they had all witnessed. Outside, the waitress reached her car. She paused again, taking a deep breath. She knew that her performance had changed the perception of the people inside, but more importantly, it had changed something within her. Confidence was not loud. It did not need to be shown through words or gestures. It could be quiet, steady, and unmistakable. She had felt that tonight, and it was a gift she would carry forward. She started the car and drove slowly through the quiet streets. The city lights blurred past, and for a moment, she allowed herself to smile. Not broadly, not triumphantly, but gently. She had done something remarkable without seeking recognition. She had honored herself, and that was enough. Back at the house, the host stood by the piano once more. He pressed his fingers lightly to the keys, not to play, but to feel the memory. The notes were absent, but the memory of the sound remained, carrying with it a lesson he could not ignore. Respect was earned, and it could come from the most unexpected places. He had witnessed it, and he could not unsee it. The remaining guests slowly departed, each carrying a sense of having been part of something unusual. Not a spectacle, not mere entertainment, but a moment that reminded them of humanity. A reminder that skill, grace, and dignity often lie hidden in unexpected places, waiting for recognition. And when they are recognized, they have the power to transform the energy of an entire room. The night ended quietly, with the house returning to stillness. The piano remained untouched, silent, yet echoing with memory. It had been more than an instrument that night. It had been a witness, a partner, and a catalyst for change. The waitress reached home, stepped inside her small apartment, and set her things down. She felt a calm that she had not expected, a quiet affirmation that she had made it through the night with grace. She did not need applause or recognition beyond what had already occurred. The night had been hers in a way that no one could take away. In the following days, the host thought about the evening repeatedly. The lessons lingered. He found himself reflecting on assumptions, on the ways he had judged others based on appearance, on status, or circumstance. He realized that humility was more valuable than dominance, that respect was more lasting than control, and that true talent often goes unnoticed until it is allowed to be seen. For the waitress, the night became a memory she returned to often, not as a story to tell, but as a reminder of her own resilience, of the power of quiet skill, of what could happen when courage met opportunity. She continued her work, moved forward with life, and carried herself differently, not because she had changed fundamentally, but because she had seen herself reflected in the eyes of others and found herself worthy. The house, the guests, the host, and the piano all became part of a single story, held together by one quiet but unforgettable performance. The music had been more than notes on keys. It had been a declaration of presence, a demonstration of dignity, and a reminder of the unexpected power that can exist in someone underestimated. And in the end, the night had left something behind that could not be erased. A memory of strength, of skill, and of quiet triumph that lingered far longer than the applause ever could. It was a night when status and wealth bowed, however briefly, to talent, grace, and courage, and it would be remembered by everyone who had witnessed it in ways that words alone could never capture.